Everybody thinks inheriting property will solve their problems. When the eviction notice appeared on Melissa Thompson's apartment door, printed on cheerful yellow paper that felt like mockery, she had exactly $42 in her checking account and 3 days to vacate. The notice arrived on Emmy's 8th birthday. No cake, no presents, just a bright yellow reminder that poverty doesn't pause for celebration. Melissa was 28 years old, working 50 hours weekly, split between a diner off Interstate 5 and late-shift data entry for an insurance company that paid by the keystroke. Her mother's battle with ovarian cancer had drained everything. When she died 6 months earlier, she left behind a shoebox stuffed with final medical bills totaling $173,000, and a grief so heavy it made breathing difficult. Melissa had maxed every credit card, keeping her comfortable at the end. Now collectors circled like vultures, sensing carry-on. The phone call came on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning while she was scraping scrambled eggs onto chipped plates for the breakfast rush. Unknown number. Her first instinct said, "Ignore it, another debt collector tracking down her new number." But something made her step into the kitchen's back corner and answer. The voice identified itself as Kenneth Lewis, attorney, calling from Bend, Oregon, regarding the estate of Robert Williams. Robert Williams, her grandfather. She hadn't seen him since she was 6 years old. Her mother's hatred for the man ran deeper than ocean trenches. Whenever his name surfaced in conversation, her jaw would clench, eyes would darken, and she'd cut off discussion with 5 words that permitted no argument. "He destroys everything he touches." Melissa knew only fragments. Robert lived entirely off-grid somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, a paranoid recluse who trusted no one, not even blood. Her mother once mentioned he'd gotten her own mother killed with his obsessions, but never explained how. Kenneth Lewis's voice carried no warmth, just dry professional efficiency. Robert Williams passed away 3 weeks prior. As sole living relative, Melissa inherited his estate. She needed to appear at the attorney's office by Friday. Melissa borrowed $40 for gas money from her shift supervisor and drove her battered Honda Civic 300 miles south, praying the entire journey that Robert's estate meant salvation. Even a few thousand would reset her life. Rent deposit, first month, breathing room. Kenneth Lewis's office contradicted her existence. Rich mahogany, expensive cologne, lingering in air-conditioned comfort. He sat across from her with steepled fingers and pushed a manila folder across polished wood. The words came without preamble, shattering fragile hope like dropped glass. Robert Williams was not wealthy. He left her a small parcel of land 40 miles outside town and the cabin occupying it. However, and Lewis paused here, with what might have been practiced sympathy, there was a complication. Robert hadn't paid property taxes in 5 years. The county demanded $6,000. Without payment within 30 days, the property would be seized and auctioned. She also inherited the cabin's contents, though Lewis noted with carefully neutral tone that Robert Williams had been quite eccentric. A rusty brass key rested atop the folder. Melissa stared at it. She'd driven 300 miles to inherit debt. Something felt wrong about the whole interaction. Lewis kept glancing at a photograph on his desk, her photograph showing her leaving her apartment building. She'd never sent him photos, never met him before today. The wrongness deepened when she reached the parking lot. A pristine black Ford F-150 sat 3 spaces from her rusted Honda. A man in his late 40s stepped out wearing a barber jacket that cost more than her monthly rent. His smile never touched his calculating blue eyes. He called her by name. Richard Miller, owner of the local lumber mill. He'd been sorry to hear about old Robert, stubborn but harmless. Then came the pivot. He knew about the tax lien. $6,000 was substantial money for a young woman to produce from nowhere. He'd tried buying this plot from Robert for years to expand logging roads. Robert always refused. Miller reached into his jacket and produced a white envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $10,000. He'd pay the county tax lien separately. She could take the money, drive back to wherever she came from, skip the headache of cleaning out a dead hoarder's trash. $10,000. A lottery win. Rent for a year. The end of collection calls. But Miller stood too close. Pushed too hard, too fast. Why was a wealthy mill owner waiting in an attorney's parking lot the exact day she arrived, cash in hand, for a worthless property Melissa's mother taught her to look gift horses in the mouth? In her experience, gift horses usually bit. She heard herself declining. She'd look through Robert's belongings first. Let him know. Miller's practiced smile vanished. Genuine ugly anger flashed across his features before smoothing over. The offer expired at sundown tomorrow. After that, he'd wait for the county to seize it and buy it at auction for pennies. A single word of advice: don't be stupid, Melissa. He climbed back into his truck and reversed, hard spraying gravel against her bumper as he sped away. Melissa stood alone in the parking lot, heart hammering. Something was catastrophically wrong here. As she turned the rusty key over in her palm, a sickening realization formed. Robert's death might not have been tragedy. It might have been convenience for someone. The drive up the mountain tested her Honda's remaining will to live. Paved roads surrendered to gravel. Gravel eventually gave way to deeply rutted dirt enclosed by towering pines that blocked most sunlight. When she finally reached the overgrown driveway, her stomach sank. The cabin wasn't rustic retreat. It was rotting shack. Sagging roof buried under decades of pine needles. Half the windows boarded with decaying plywood. The front porch looked ready to collapse. Jake sat in the back seat studying everything with his 9-year-old intensity. Emmy pressed against the opposite window, eyes wide with fear. They'd come with her. Melissa couldn't afford childcare, couldn't leave them alone in the apartment, so they'd packed 2 changes of clothes and driven into the mountains together, the way they did everything as a unit of 3 against the world. Jake spoke first voice, carefully neutral, to hide disappointment. "This is worth $10,000, Emmy refused to unbuckle. "Something's wrong here, Mommy. The trees are watching." Melissa wanted to comfort her daughter, explain that trees don't watch, that fear makes us see threats everywhere. But she felt it too, the oppressive silence. No birds, no highway noise, just heavy quiet that pressed against eardrums. She was reaching for Emmy's hand when the crunch of tires on gravel made her freeze. Miller's black F-150 pulled up behind her Honda, blocking them in. He stepped out with boots that splashed carelessly through puddles approaching her driver's window. She'd told him she needed to think. 20 minutes had passed. How had he known she'd come directly here? Miller's tone held less practiced charm, now more naked pressure. He'd heard she had 2 kids to feed. "Don't be stupid." This area was isolated, no cell service. Accidents happened to people who wandered into the woods unprepared. Jake opened his door and stepped out, positioning himself between Miller and his mother. The 9-year-old barely reached the man's chest, but his jaw set with determination that made Melissa's throat tighten. Miller looked at Jake for a long moment, then back at Melissa. The offer stood until tomorrow. After that, he'd let nature take its course. He drove away, but this time he didn't go far. Melissa could see his truck parked a quarter-mile down the road, visible through the trees. Watching. She made the decision quickly. They'd sleep in the car tonight. The cabin looked structurally unsound. Safer to camp in the Honda with doors locked than risk floors collapsing beneath them. As darkness fell, Emmy curled against her mother's shoulder in the reclined front seat. Jake kept watch from the back, staring through the rear window at the distant headlights that flashed on every 2 hours like clockwork. Miller's men making sure they knew they were being observed. Emmy woke screaming at 3 in the morning. Nightmare about a room underground and a man trying to tell her something important. Melissa held her whispering reassurance while Jake watched with worried eyes. When dawn broke, Melissa left the kids in the car with strict instructions. Stay inside, doors locked. If anyone except her approaches, lean on the horn. The cabin's interior matched expectations. Stale air, thick with dust, old newspapers forming jagged pillars, thrift store furniture buried under moth-eaten blankets. But as Melissa moved through the space, searching for anything valuable enough to pawn, inconsistencies emerged. The locks on the front door weren't original. Commercial-grade deadbolts recently installed. The windows weren't just boarded for weather. The plywood was reinforced from inside with iron brackets. This wasn't weather protection. This was fortification designed to withstand siege. Prescription bottles in the bathroom cabinet showed dates from 2 weeks ago. Robert died 3 weeks ago. Someone had been here after his death. Jake disobeyed within an hour. He appeared in the doorway with Emmy behind him, defiant. "We're safer together, Mom." Melissa wanted to argue, send them back to the car, maintain the illusion of control. But he was right. Separating made them vulnerable. Jake started documenting with a disposable camera he'd bought at the gas station with coins saved from his room. Emmy found an antique music box on a dusty shelf, turning the key to release a haunting melody. Underneath, carved into the wood, RW plus KH. Who was KH? Jake discovered a hidden drawer in the old desk. Locked. He pulled out a bent paperclip from his pocket and began working the mechanism with practiced ease. Melissa stared. "When did you learn to pick locks, YouTube, before our phone got shut off? In case you locked yourself out of the apartment." The drawer opened. Inside, letters bundled with string, faded ink on yellowed paper, love letters from someone signing only as E. The most recent was dated 2 weeks before Robert's death. "They're getting closer. Please be careful. I can't lose you." The crunch of boots on the porch killed conversation. Melissa moved instinctively, positioning herself between the door and her children. An elderly man appeared in the doorway, hands raised to show he meant no harm. Nervous energy radiated from him. He kept glancing over his shoulder toward the tree line. Marcus Webb. He'd lived in the next valley for 40 years. Robert had shown him Melissa's photograph last year, her with the kids at a park. Robert said if anything happened to him, find them. Melissa's mind raced. Find them. Robert died of natural causes. Heart attack. Marcus' laugh held no humor. That's what they want everyone to think. He'd seen Sheriff Thomas at Robert's well 2 days before the death, pouring something into the water. 2 days later, Robert was dead. Coroner ruled heart attack without performing autopsy. He couldn't report what he'd seen. Thomas was the law in Pine Ridge. Reporting would only get Marcus killed, too. Marcus pressed a key into Melissa's palm. Robert told him to give this to family if anything happened. He couldn't explain what it opened. Robert never said. But it was important. He left quickly, practically running back into the woods, looking over his shoulder the entire time. Melissa stood holding the key, her children watching her with questions in their eyes. The music box melody still played faintly in the background. RO plus KH, letters from E. A key with unknown purpose. Robert murdered 2 days after someone poisoned his well. Emmy spoke quietly, measuring the kitchen wall with her hands. "Mommy, the math doesn't work." Jake joined her, pacing the exterior wall, then the interior of the adjacent pantry. His engineering mind immediately grasped the problem. There's a 4-foot gap, hidden space. Melissa moved to the pantry, studying the back wall. She grabbed a rusted crowbar from a toolbox and began tapping along the baseboard. Solid, hollow. She shoved the wooden shelving unit aside. It scraped across linoleum, revealing a section of beadboard paneling slightly cleaner than its surroundings. Her fingers found the seams, searching for mechanism or hinge. At the bottom right corner, a knot in the wood felt loose. She pressed. A metallic clack echoed through the cabin loud enough to make Emmy gasp. Slowly, silently, a 3-foot section of wall swung inward on perfectly oiled hidden hinges. Cool air rushed out from darkness. It didn't smell like the rotting cabin. It smelled sterile. Antiseptic, old paper. Melissa pulled her phone from her pocket, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through blackness, illuminating steep concrete stairs, descending into earth beneath the cabin. Jake whispered the question they all thought. "Grandpa, what were you doing?" Melissa's instinct screamed to grab the kids and run. Get in the car, drive to the highway, take Miller's money tomorrow, and never look back. But Marcus Webb's face haunted her, the terror in his eyes when he mentioned Sheriff Thomas, the way he'd run back into the woods like prey fleeing a predator. If Robert was murdered, whoever did it knew about this hidden room. They might know Melissa was here right now. Running meant looking over her shoulder forever. She gripped the crowbar tighter. "Kids, stay at the top of the stairs where I can see you. If anything happens, run to the car." Jake's response came immediately. "No, we're a team." Emmy's voice trembled, but held firm. "We'll follow you anyway." Melissa realized she couldn't stop them. Better to keep them close than have them disobey and get separated. She descended carefully, testing each concrete step. The stairs went deeper than any storm cellar, 20 feet, maybe more. At the bottom, a heavy steel door stood unlocked. She pushed it open. Her hand found an industrial light switch on the wall. Fluorescent tubes flickered to life, with low electric hum, flooding the space with harsh white light. She was standing in a concrete bunker roughly 20 feet square, meticulously clean. Against the far wall, a massive steel desk covered in ham. Radio equipment and a police scanner. A bulky desktop computer from the early 2000s. Next to it, filing cabinets organized with military precision. On the center table, wrapped in thick, vacuum-sealed plastic bags, sat stacks of money. Melissa stumbled forward, legs weak. She grabbed one package, $100 bills, old green-faced bills from the 90s and early 2000s. She did quick math. Each bundle held 10,000, 8 bundles on the table, $80,000 sitting in her dead grandfather's secret underground bunker. Jake's voice cracked with fear behind her. "Mom, is Grandpa a criminal?" Emmy started crying. "Are we going to go to jail?" Melissa's mind spun. Bank robber, drug runner. What kind of man builds a concrete bunker beneath a rotting cabin and fills it with cash? She moved to the filing cabinets. The drawers were organized alphabetically, packed with manila folders and typed documents. She pulled open the drawer labeled M through R. Her eyes locked immediately onto a thick folder, Miller Richard. She yanked it out, spreading contents across the metal desk. Dozens of 8 by 10 photographs. They looked 15 years old, shot from distance through telephoto lens. A younger Richard Miller, standing on a loading dock at his lumber mill, handing thick envelopes to men in dark windbreakers. Photocopies of bank transfers, county land registries, handwritten notes in sharp angular cursive, Robert's handwriting. Miller using logging routes to move product across Canadian border, bribing County Sheriff Thomas $5,000 monthly to look away. Land grabs aren't for timber. They're to secure smuggling corridor. Melissa stared at the words. Miller didn't want this cabin because it obstructed his business. He wanted it because Robert Williams was a threat. Her grandfather wasn't a criminal. He was a self-appointed investigator. He'd been hoarding leverage on the most corrupt men in the county. Then her blood turned to ice water. Tucked in the back of Miller's file was a smaller, unmarked envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. 3 photographs fell out. Recent, crisp digital prints. The first showed Melissa walking out of her diner in waitress uniform. The second showed her mother's headstone at the cemetery. The third showed Melissa sitting in her Honda, stopped at a red light. The date stamp indicated the photo was taken 4 days ago. Robert had been dead for 3 weeks. He didn't take these pictures. Someone else had been watching her. Someone else had placed this envelope in Robert's hidden bunker after he died, leaving it as trophy or warning to whoever found the room. The heavy silence shattered. Above them, through thick concrete ceiling, came the unmistakable sound of wood splintering. The cabin's front door being kicked open. Heavy, frantic footsteps thudded across the living room floor directly overhead. A male voice boomed, muffled but terrifyingly aggressive. "Melissa, I know your car is outside. Where are you, Richard Miller?" And he didn't sound like he wanted to make real estate deals anymore. Melissa scrambled to the light switch, plunging the bunker into absolute blackness. She grabbed both children, pulling them into the furthest corner, clutching the crowbar to her chest, barely daring to breathe as the footsteps above moved closer toward the pantry. Jake's hand found hers in the darkness. Emmy's small body pressed against her side, trembling. Miller's voice echoed through the floorboards. "I know you're in here, Melissa. Your car hood's still warm. Stop playing games and come out." The screech of wood being dragged across linoleum. He'd found the pantry shelving unit. He was pulling it aside. Melissa's mind raced. How did Miller know about the hollow wall? The hidden door. Marcus Webb said Robert kept this bunker secret for decades. Who told Miller it existed? Then she understood. The recent photos in the file. Someone with access to this bunker after Robert's death. Someone who knew she was coming. Someone who set her up. The heavy metallic clack of the hidden door mechanism, engaging, echoed down the stairs. "Well, well, well." Miller's voice carried dark satisfaction. "You crazy old bastard! You actually built it!" A beam of bright, tactical flashlight pierced the darkness at the top of the stairs. Melissa had seconds, maybe less. A man like Robert Williams, paranoid survivalist, who built hidden concrete bunkers to spy on crime syndicates, would never design a room with only one exit. It violated every rule of survival preparation. There had to be secondary egress. Her hands frantically patted the wall behind her in pitch blackness, searching. Her fingers brushed something metallic near the floor, a heavy steel latch. She yanked hard. The latch groaned with rusted squeal that sounded like gunshot in the silent room. Miller's flashlight beam swept down the concrete steps. "Melissa!" His voice dropped an octave into something low and deadly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Step, step, step. She threw her weight against the secondary latch. A small 3-foot-tall steel hatch swung inward, revealing corrugated metal drainage pipe smelling of wet earth and decaying leaves. Melissa didn't think. She grabbed the Miller file from the desk, shoving it into her jacket, swept her arm across the table, grabbing 2 vacuum-sealed money bricks, stuffing them into her coat pockets. "Don't move." Miller's flashlight found her half-crawling toward the drainage pipe with her children. He lunged across the room, drawing a dark pistol from his jacket. Melissa shoved Jake toward the pipe opening. "Go now." Jake scrambled into the darkness. Emmy followed, whimpering with terror. Miller's boots pounded across concrete. Melissa threw herself head-first into the pipe, kicking the steel hatch shut behind her with her boot heel. The muffled thud of Miller slamming into the metal door, frantic scrambling as he searched for the latch on his side. Melissa was in a pipe, barely wider than her shoulders, absolute blackness, surrounded by damp soil smell. She crawled forward, scraping elbows raw against corrugated metal, dragging herself like rat in maze, hyperventilating as claustrophobia crushed her chest. "Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving." Jake's voice ahead in darkness. "Mom, I can see light." The pipe angled slightly downward. She crawled what felt like miles, but was likely only 100 yards. Faint gray light appeared ahead, rainwater trickling in. She burst from the pipe's end, tumbling down muddy embankment into shallow ravine, choked with blackberry brambles. Thorns tore jeans and face, but she didn't care. She scrambled to her feet, gasping freezing Oregon air. Through the pine canopy above, she could see the cabin. Miller's flashlight sweeping through windows. He was outside now, hunting. Then her blood ran cold again. A second set of headlights pulled up the gravel driveway. White SUV with prominent red and blue light bars on the roof. County Sheriff. Relief washed over her for exactly 2 seconds before Robert's handwritten notes flashed in her mind. Bribing County Sheriff Thomas, $5,000 monthly to look the way. She watched as a man in tan uniform stepped out of the cruiser. Miller emerged from the tree line, lowering his flashlight. He didn't raise his hands, didn't look surprised. He walked straight to Sheriff Thomas, pointed angrily toward the back of the property, handed over his flashlight. They were working together. If Melissa ran to that patrol car for help, she'd be dead before morning, body dumped in a logging trench where no one would ever find it. She touched the cold, wet envelope shoved into her jacket. Jake and Emmy huddled against her in the brambles clothes, torn faces, scratched eyes wide with terror. Melissa was completely alone in the woods, hunted by local law and local money, armed with nothing but a crowbar, $80,000 in cash, and a dead man's secrets about crimes she barely understood. She looked at her children's faces, Jake trying to be brave, Emmy trying not to cry, both looking to their mother for answers. Have you ever had to choose between safety and justice when choosing safety meant teaching your children that power always wins? Melissa made her decision. She grabbed both their hands. "We run." They ran through suffocating darkness of Pacific Northwest forest rain, beginning as light mist that quickly became downpour. Melissa's calf throbbed where Miller's bullet had grazed it in the drainage pipe. She'd felt the impact, but adrenaline had masked the pain until now. Each step sent fire up her leg. She couldn't let the kids see, couldn't let them know their mother was bleeding potentially badly with no hospital option and 60 miles of wilderness between them and safety. Jake led the way, navigating by the faint glow of highway lights reflecting off low cloud cover. 9 years old, and he'd become their compass. Emmy stumbled frequently, exhausted and terrified, but she didn't complain. Melissa's heart broke, watching her baby girl push through fear that would paralyze most adults. Rain washed away their tracks in the mud, masked the sound of their movement through underbrush. A blessing that came with the curse of freezing temperatures and zero visibility. Melissa's clothes were soaked through within 20 minutes. The kids shivered violently. 4 hours of hiking, Melissa's muscles screamed. Her hands had gone numb from cold. But the terror of what lay behind them, Miller with his gun, Sheriff Thomas with his badge, the entire corrupt machinery of Pine Ridge, hunting 3 people who knew too much, kept her legs moving. Around 2 in the morning, Jake's flashlight app he'd been rationing, phone battery, illuminated a structure through the trees. Abandoned hunting blind, small and drafty, but better than exposure. They collapsed inside. Melissa stripped the kids' wet clothes, wrapping them in emergency blanket she'd grabbed from the Honda's trunk before they fled. Jake had thought to bring it, another small miracle of her son's foresight. Emmy's lips were turning blue, early hypothermia. Melissa rubbed her daughter's hands, her feet generating friction and warmth, while her own body shook with cold and infection. Jake kept watch at the blind's small window, staring into rain-soaked darkness. The disposable camera hung around his neck. He'd refused to leave it behind. Evidence, he'd said. We need evidence. Melissa's fever was climbing. The bullet graze wasn't deep, but it was infected. She could feel heat radiating from the wound, the sick throb of bacteria multiplying in torn tissue. Jake turned from the window, studying her face in the dim glow of his phone's dying battery. "Mom, you're hurt. Just a scratch." The lie came automatically maternal instinct to shield him from the full weight of their situation. His expression said he didn't believe her, but he accepted the fiction. Sometimes love meant letting people protect you with their lies. Melissa pulled both children close, using body heat to fight the cold. Emmy fell asleep almost immediately, small body going slack with exhaustion. Jake stayed awake, keeping vigil. The whispered conversation happened in the gap between Emmy's soft breathing and the drumming rain. "I'm scared, Mom." "Me too. But we're Thompson Walker Moore strong." She used all their names, her maiden name, Jake's father's name, Emmy's father's name. 2 failed relationships that had given her the only things in life worth fighting for. The kids didn't share a father, didn't share a last name, but they shared everything that mattered. Grandpa was trying to save us, wasn't he? Yes, and now it's our turn to finish what he started. Jake's 9-year-old mind processed this, turned it over, examined it from angles. Do you think he loved us? Even though he never met us, I think he loved us so much it hurt. Sometimes love means staying away from the people you'd die to protect. The fever broke near dawn. Melissa woke to weak sunlight filtering through the blind's gaps, and Emmy curled against her side, breathing steadily. Jake had fallen asleep, sitting up back against the wall, keeping watch until exhaustion claimed him. Melissa pulled the Miller file from her jacket, studying contents in morning light. The surveillance photos, the bank records, the handwritten notes documenting years of investigation. Robert Williams had been meticulous, professional. This wasn't amateur hour conspiracy theory. This was law enforcement level documentation. She found something new in the file, a marriage certificate she'd missed in the bunker's chaos. Donald Thomas married to Christine Miller, Richard's sister. Sheriff Thomas wasn't just paid muscle, he was family, brother-in-law, protecting brother-in-law. Blood loyalty explained why the corruption ran so deep, why Thomas would falsify Robert's death report, why he'd come to the cabin to help Miller hunt them. The realization settled like stone in her stomach. They weren't just running from criminals, they were running from a family business. Jake stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He noticed Melissa examining the love letters from the music box, the ones signed E. "I've been looking at those. There's a pattern." Melissa waited. Jake's pattern recognition skills were uncanny. Video games and puzzle books had trained his brain to see connections invisible to adults. First letter of each sentence. "Look," she followed his finger as he traced down the page. "Storage." The next letter, UNIT. The one after that, 247. Storage Unit 247. And look at the postmark. Bend, Oregon. Robert had left them a coded trail. If they could reach Bend 40 miles through hostile territory, they might find answers. Or more pieces of a puzzle they were still assembling while being hunted. Emmy woke whimpering, "Mommy, I'm hungry." Melissa had nothing to give her. The last granola bar had been consumed yesterday. Her pockets held an $80,000 in vacuum-sealed cash, and she couldn't buy her daughter breakfast. "We need to get to the highway. Flag down help." Jake's practical mind was already working the problem. Not just any car, truck drivers, commercial vehicles, less likely to be connected to Miller. How do you know that Grandpa's notes mentioned he hired truckers to transport documents? If we find the right person, maybe they'll help. Sometimes children saw solutions adults missed because they hadn't yet learned all the reasons things were impossible. They hiked for 6 more hours. Melissa's leg barely functional now, each step an exercise in willpower. She used a branch as makeshift crutch. Jake supported Emmy when the 8-year-old's exhaustion made her stumble. The forest finally surrendered to the sound of traffic. Highway 97. Melissa made them wait in a culvert beside the road, hidden from view, until a commercial vehicle appeared. Families hitchhiked together, less threatening than a lone woman. That's our story. An 18-wheeler crested the hill, engine roaring. Melissa stepped onto the shoulder, waving both arms. Jake and Emmy stood behind her, small and bedraggled and impossible to ignore. The truck's air brakes hissed. Massive rig ground to halt 50 yards ahead. A burly, bearded man leaned out the cab, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. His name badge read, Gary Young. "Jesus, lady, you look like you crawled out of a grave. Get in before you freeze." Melissa hesitated. Trust was luxury they couldn't afford. But Emmy was shivering again. Jake's lips were purple, and her own vision was starting to blur from fever. "I need to use your phone. Please, it's an emergency." Gary didn't ask questions. He popped the passenger door, helped them climb into the heated cab. The warmth hit like physical force. Emmy's teeth chattered so violently she couldn't speak. Gary handed Melissa his phone and pulled the truck back onto the highway, heading south. Melissa's first instinct was to dial 911, but 911 would route to county dispatch. Sheriff Thomas would be waiting. She opened the web browser, searched FBI Field Office, Portland, Oregon, found the main number. Her finger hovered over the call button. Wait, what would she tell them? That her grandfather documented crimes but was now dead? That local police were corrupt without the USB drive Robert mentioned in his note, without Catherine Hill. Whoever she was, without the full picture, she was just another conspiracy theorist with wild accusations. Robert Williams was a good man. I knew him. Gary's voice made Melissa jump. She'd been so focused on the phone she hadn't noticed him studying her in the rearview mirror. How did you... He paid me to transport documents to Portland, about 10 years back. Never asked what was in the sealed boxes. Figured it was legal trouble for someone none of my business. Last time I saw him, he said, "If anything happens to me, my granddaughter will finish this." Gary's eyes met Melissa's in the mirror. "That's you, isn't it?" The calculation happened in seconds. Gary had worked with Robert. Robert trusted him. That had to count for something. "Yes." Gary nodded, kept driving. After 2 miles of silence, "Robert paid me well back then. Good man. Principled." The phone in Melissa's hand rang. Unknown number. She answered reflexively, exhausted brain not processing the danger. "Melissa, we need to talk. Kenneth Lewis, the attorney." His voice carried urgency that hadn't been present in his office. "How did you get this number?" Melissa's blood turned cold. Gary's phone, private number. How did Lewis have it? "Come to my office. I can offer protection. From Richard Miller. He's out of control. I can stop him. From who your partners. It's more complicated than you understand. Miller doesn't speak for all of us. There are factions. I can negotiate safe passage for you and your children." Melissa hung up, stared at the phone like it was venomous snake. She looked at Gary, trying to read his expression. "Did you call Kenneth Lewis?" Never heard of him. But Lewis had Gary's number, which meant Lewis had resources to track phone records, GPS locations, maybe real-time monitoring of highway cameras. The scope of the corruption was bigger than Melissa had imagined. These weren't just local criminals. This was organized. Gary pulled off at a truck stop in Bend at 3 in the morning. The parking lot was nearly empty. He gave Melissa $200 cash. "Robert paid me well back then. This is for his family, and directions to the storage facility. It opens at 6. Get yourselves cleaned up in the restroom. Buy some food from the vending machines. Clean that wound on your leg before it kills you. You saw that I've got a daughter Emmy's age. I notice things." Gary drove away without asking for the $200 back, without asking details, without getting involved beyond the debt he felt he owed to a dead man who'd once trusted him. Melissa, Jake, and Emmy spent 3 hours in the truck stop restroom. Melissa cleaned her wound with paper towels and soap, biting through a leather wallet to muffle her screams. The gash was infected edges red and swollen, but the bleeding had stopped. She fashioned a bandage from Jake's t-shirt, he insisted, and prayed it would hold until they could find real medical help. They ate stale sandwiches from vending machines. First food in 36 hours. Emmy cried while eating, overwhelmed by gratitude and terror and exhaustion. At 6:15 a.m., they stood outside storage facility 247. The manager hadn't arrived yet. Jake studied the lock on the main gate. "I can pick this. When did my 9-year-old become a criminal? YouTube." Before the phone got shut off, "I thought if you ever locked yourself out of the apartment, I could help." The lock clicked open under Jake's paperclip manipulation. They slipped inside, found Unit 247, and Jake worked that lock too. Inside, plastic storage bins, camping gear, a laptop, a large map of Oregon covered in red X marks. Emmy found a box labeled for Melissa in careful block letters. Inside was a photo album Melissa had never seen. Pictures of her as baby held by Robert Williams. Photos she didn't know existed, her grandfather holding her smiling with genuine joy before whatever happened that made her mother cut him out of their lives. Beneath the photos, a letter in Robert's handwriting. Dear Melissa, I'm sorry I couldn't be in your life. Your mother had her reasons. I endangered her mother, your grandmother, with my investigation in 1995. Hit and run, that was no accident. She never forgave me, but I never stopped watching over you from afar. This USB contains everything. If you're reading this, I failed to stop them. Please finish what I couldn't. I love you. Grandpa. Melissa's vision blurred with tears. All these years, she'd believed Robert was the monster her mother described, a paranoid hermit who abandoned his family. But he hadn't abandoned them. He'd sacrificed proximity to protect them while building a case against the people who'd killed his wife. Some inheritances are burdens, others are missions. The USB drive was labeled Insurance in Permanent Marker. Jake plugged it into the laptop Robert had left in the storage unit. Battery still held charge. Files loaded. Bank records showing millions moving through Kenneth Lewis's estate law practice. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Photographs of lumber trucks with false compartments. Audio recordings of phone conversations discussing shipment schedules and border crossing times. One folder was labeled Proof of Murder. Inside, medical reports showing elevated arsenic levels in Robert's blood work from 2 weeks before his death. Dr. Sharon Harris's notes reported suspicious findings to county medical examiner, report suppressed by Sheriff Thomas, patient subsequently deceased, cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, inconsistent with clinical presentation. Robert had known he was being poisoned, had documented it, had tried to report it, and the system designed to protect him had been corrupted from the inside. In the box was also a burner phone. One contact saved KH. Melissa powered it on, dialed the number. It rang 4 times. She was about to hang up when a woman's voice answered, Robert. The hope in that single word broke Melissa's heart. He's dead. I'm his granddaughter. The sound of sobbing on the other end. Then they killed him. I tried to warn him. Come to the safe house. GPS coordinates 44.0, 582 north, 121.3, 153 west. The call cut off abruptly. Not a hang-up, more like the phone had been knocked from the woman's hand, a muffled scream, then silence. Melissa stared at the dead connection. Catherine Hill, K.H. The woman whose initials were carved into the music box was in trouble. Before she could process this, footsteps echoed in the storage facility corridor. Fast, purposeful, a woman rushed into the unit. Mid-30s professional clothing, holding an ID badge. Don't scream. I'm Laura Clark. I work for Kenneth Lewis. Melissa grabbed the crowbar, she'd been carrying it since the bunker, and positioned herself between the stranger and her children. Laura raised both hands in surrender. I'm the one who put those surveillance photos in the bunker, to warn you. Why should I trust you? Because I'm FBI. She pulled her blouse aside, slightly revealing a wire taped to her skin. Active recording device, small LED light, blinking green. Bureau's been investigating Lewis for 18 months. I've been embedded as his secretary, feeding evidence to the field office. Robert Williams was working with me. We were partners. Jake's skeptical voice cut through. How do we know that's real? Laura reached slowly into her wallet, extracted a second ID. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Laura Clark, Portland Field Office. Also pulled out her phone, showed text messages from a contact labeled, Agent Williams, is the package secure? Timestamp from 2 hours ago. Melissa studied the woman. Exhausted eyes, nervous energy. Someone who'd been living double life for a year and a half, constantly looking over her shoulder. "What do you want from us?" "I'll drive you to Portland FBI office. Agent Jennifer Williams, no relation to Robert, is clean. She's been waiting for this evidence. We need that USB drive and your testimony." Jake whispered to his mother, "How did she know we'd be here?" "Good question." Laura's eyes flicked to Jake, reassessing. "Smart kid. I've had GPS tracker on Gary Young's truck since Robert first hired him. When it stopped here, I knew." The explanation made sense. Too much sense. Melissa's instinct screamed that something was wrong, but she couldn't identify what. Laura continued. "Lewis inherited the smuggling operation from his father, Maxwell Lewis. Died in 2010. Kenneth legitimized it through his law practice. Estate sales, property transfers, money laundering on massive scale. Miller handles logistics. Sheriff Thomas handles enforcement and evidence suppression. Everything Laura said matched Robert's files. But Melissa remembered Kenneth Lewis calling Gary's phone. Lewis knew they were running, which meant he had access to tracking data, which meant either Laura was lying about the FBI or there was a leak in the Bureau, or who's Catherine Hill? Laura's expression shifted. Complicated question. Catherine was Robert's romantic partner, former Oregon State Trooper, went undercover at Miller's lumber mill 4 days ago. We lost contact. She's either captured or dead. She showed a photo on her phone. Catherine Hill, 52, blonde hair, pulled back in professional ponytail. Strong jaw, cop's eyes, the music box, the letters. Robert and Catherine had been more than partners in investigation. They'd been in love. Jake was studying Laura with 9-year-old intensity that missed nothing. "Where did you get your coffee this morning?" "What, your cup?" "In your car? I saw it when you got out." "Where's it from?" "Starbucks on Highway 20. "Why does that matter?" Jake's face remained neutral, just wondering. But Melissa caught something in her son's tone. He'd spotted inconsistency. She made mental note to ask him later. Laura gestured toward the storage unit exit. "We should move. Miller has people watching the highways. My car's unmarked. Safer than trying to run." The calculation again. Trust a stranger claiming to be FBI, or strike out alone with 2 children, $80,000 in cash, and half of Pine Ridge hunting them. Melissa made the choice. "Let's go." They drove north toward Portland in Laura's Honda sedan. Kids in back. Melissa in front passenger seat, studying the woman for tells. Laura drove confidently, explained the full scope of the operation while navigating highway traffic. Canadian border route, opioids coming south, weapons and cash going north, lumber trucks modified with false bottom compartments. Sheriff Thomas escorts every shipment through his jurisdiction. Lewis launders the money through estate sales, buying properties from desperate families, flipping them at markup, washing dirty money through legitimate transactions. How long has this been running? Maxwell Lewis started it in the 80s. 35 years of operation. Robert stumbled onto it when investigating his wife's death. Spent 3 decades building a case. Emmy was asleep in the back small head, resting against Jake's shoulder. Jake watched the road behind them in the side mirror. "That black SUV is following us." Laura glanced in the rear view. "That's FBI surveillance. They're protecting us." Jake's expression said he didn't buy it. The SUV maintained exact 3-car distance, never closer, never farther. Too precise, too consistent. Melissa's unease was growing. Laura's story fit all the facts, but something felt staged, rehearsed, like an actress hitting marks in a script. Laura took an exit off I-5. This isn't the way to Portland. Shortcut. Avoids Miller's roadblocks on the main highway. They were on a rural highway now, then a smaller road, then gravel. Trees closing in on both sides. No cell service. Melissa checked her phone. 0 bars. Trust me. Laura's voice had changed slightly. Less urgent, more controlled. This isn't right. Turn around. Laura's right hand moved to the center console, drew a pistol, pointed it at Melissa's chest. "Don't move!" Emmy screamed. Jake lunged forward from the back seat. Laura swung the gun toward him. "Shut up, both of you. You're not FBI." Melissa's voice was ice. "Oh, I was. Until Kenneth Lewis offered me $2 million to turn. Former Special Agent Laura Clark at your service." The bitterness in her voice was genuine. This wasn't performance. This was confession. I'm the one who poisoned Robert's well water. Sheriff Thomas just falsified the death report. Williams trusted me, invited me into his bunker, showed me everything. Big mistake. Melissa's rage was white hot. You killed him. He was getting too close. Lewis authorized it. Business decision. Laura pulled onto an isolated logging road, stopped the car in a small clearing, kept the gun trained on Melissa. Here's how this works. Williams's laptop has cloud backup access. Lewis needs your biometric login. Your grandfather set it up with your childhood fingerprint from medical records. You're going to give Lewis that access, or I shoot your daughter first, then your son, then you. The USB drive wouldn't be enough. The cloud backup held everything, Robert's entire 30-year investigation. If Lewis got access, he could delete it all. Erase the evidence. Walk away clean. Jake's hand was moving slowly toward the door handle. "Don't even think about it, kid." But Jake wasn't running. He was calculating. His eyes met Melissa's in the rearview mirror for half a second. Some wordless communication passed between them. Then Jake threw the disposable camera straight at Laura's face. The flash went off on impact. Laura screamed, temporarily blinded. Melissa lunged for the gun. They fought in the front seat. Laura had training, but Melissa had desperation. Emmy bailed out the back door. Jake followed. The gun fired. Bullet punched through the windshield. Laura's shoulder erupted blood. She'd shot herself in the struggle. Melissa ripped the weapon from Laura's weakened grip, shoved the car door open, stumbled out. Laura was screaming into her phone with her functioning arm. "They're escaping! Logging Road 39! Send the helicopter!" The thud of rotor blades in the distance. Miller had serious resources. Military-grade resources. Melissa grabbed both children's hands. They ran into dense forest. Behind them, Laura's screaming continued. Grid Sector 7 on foot. The trees were thick here, old growth. They ran until lungs burned, until legs gave out, until they reached a steep gorge with rushing river 40 feet below. No other direction. Miller's helicopter was circling, flashlights cutting through the trees behind them. "We jump." Jake's face drained of color. "Mom, I can't swim that well. Have you ever had to teach your children to trust you by asking them to leap into darkness? I've got you. Link arms. We stay together." Emmy was crying. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Me too, baby. But we're Thompson Walker Moore strong. Remember." She gripped both their hands, counted to 3. They jumped. The impact drove air from Melissa's lungs. Freezing water surrounded them. Current was violent, pulling them under. Emmy went down. Jake dove, grabbed his sister. Melissa grabbed both, using her body as flotation kicking for the surface. The current swept them downstream. Quarter mile, half mile. Melissa held her children above water until her arms screamed, until the current finally weakened and they could claw toward the bank. They collapsed on muddy shore, hypothermic, battered, coughing river water, but alive. Jake looked at his mother, teeth chattering. "Is this over?" "Not yet, but we're still here." Emmy passed out, shock and hypothermia stealing consciousness. Melissa checked her pulse, weak but present, stripped her daughter's wet clothes, wrapped her in the vacuum-sealed money bags, waterproof insulated. Sometimes you protect your children with weapons. Sometimes you protect them with the evidence of other people's crimes repurposed as survival gear. The helicopter searchlight swept overhead. They pressed into the underbrush. Silent, barely breathing, the light moved on. Melissa held her unconscious daughter and her trembling son, and understood something Robert had learned 30 years ago. Being a parent means you don't get to collapse until your children are safe, and sometimes not even then. They stumbled through darkness for 2 hours before finding shelter. An abandoned lumber mill, windows broken, machinery rusted, silent. Jake broke into the office building using skills Melissa no longer questioned. Her son had become someone different over the past 3 days, harder, more capable. She mourned the childhood being burned away by necessity. Emmy wasn't waking up. Her pulse was thread-thin, lips still blue, despite being wrapped in the money bags. Melissa started a fire in a metal drum, fed it with broken office furniture. The heat was immediate, and dangerous smoke would give away their position, but Emmy needed warmth, or she'd die. Jake stripped his sister down to skin, wrapped her in dry tarp from the mill office, held her close to the flames, while Melissa stood guard at the broken window. Her own fever was climbing again. The wound on her calf had opened during the river crossing. Blood seeped through Jake's t-shirt bandage. She could smell infection now, sweet and rotten, the kind of smell that meant tissue death. They had maybe 24 hours before sepsis killed her. While the kids warmed up, Melissa checked Laura's phone. She'd grabbed it during the struggle. Group chat between Lewis Miller, Sheriff Thomas, and Laura. The most recent message made her stop breathing. Miller family at Old Cascade Mill. Surround and secure. Lewis, no. Catherine talks if we kill the kids, bring them to Warehouse 12. Catherine was alive, being held as leverage. The coordinates were embedded in Miller's message. Emmy stirred, coughing. Her eyes opened. "Mommy?" Melissa held her daughter, felt the small body trembling. "I'm here, baby. You're okay." But Emmy wasn't okay. None of them were okay. They were 8 miles from a warehouse where a woman was being held hostage, 60 miles from the nearest FBI office, hunted by people with helicopters and unlimited resources. Jake was reading over Melissa's shoulder. "We have to save her. She's a stranger. We run. We get to Portland. We give the FBI everything and let them handle it. Grandpa died protecting us. Catherine tried to save him. If we run, they kill her. Then they come for us anyway. You're 9 years old, and you taught me that family doesn't quit. Catherine was Grandpa's family. That makes her ours." Melissa wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that survival trumped honor, that getting your children to safety was the only mission that mattered. But she looked at Jake's face, Robert's stubbornness etched into features too young to carry it, and knew the argument was already lost. Emmy's voice was weak but clear. "Grandpa says Catherine knows where the proof is." "What proof?" "The video. The one that shows them killing the state investigator. The car crash that wasn't a crash." Melissa stared at her daughter. Emmy had never met Robert. These messages from him were either fever dreams or something Melissa didn't understand. But Emmy's intuition had been right too many times to ignore. Robert's laptop was in Jake's backpack. He'd grabbed it from the storage unit. Battery somehow still holding charge. Jake booted it up. Password screen. Try your birthday, Mom. The system unlocked. Files loaded. Video diaries organized by date. The most recent was from 2 weeks before Robert's death. Robert's face filled the screen, older than the photos Melissa had seen, weathered by decades in the mountains. But his eyes were sharp, alive. "Melissa, if you're watching this, I'm gone. I'm sorry." His voice cracked on the apology. "Your grandmother, my wife Patricia, was Oregon State Trooper. In 1995, she investigated Maxwell Lewis for racketeering. Hit and run killed her 3 days before she was scheduled to testify. Witnesses said the vehicle accelerated intentionally. Drove up onto the sidewalk. No charges ever filed. Your mother blamed me, said I brought death to our door. She was right. I did. But I couldn't stop investigating. Patricia deserved justice." He paused, composing himself. "I met Catherine Hill in 2005. State trooper, like Patricia. She wanted to finish what my wife started. We went undercover together. Built the case piece by piece. Kenneth Lewis Maxwell's son took over the operation in 2010. Made it bigger, more sophisticated." Robert leaned closer to the camera. "Catherine has the master file. Video showing Kenneth ordering the murder of state investigator Sarah Morgan in 2015. They made it look like single-car accident, but we caught the planning meeting on tape. Catherine hid the file in the bunker, under the floorboard where I proposed to her. If they capture Catherine, she'll die before revealing the location." His expression hardened. "Please save her. She's all I had left. And she's the key to destroying them." The video ended. Melissa sat in silence, processing. Robert hadn't just been investigating crimes. He'd been avenging his wife, building a case across 30 years. Catherine wasn't just his partner. She was the woman who'd helped him carry grief that would have destroyed most people. The impossible choice crystallized: run to safety and let Catherine die, or finish what Robert started and risk everything. Jake was already working on Robert's laptop, uploading the USB files to cloud storage. He'd learned to navigate file systems from YouTube tutorials back when they could afford internet. Now those skills meant survival. "What are you doing uploading everything?" FBI Portland, Oregon. DOJ Seattle Times, 5 other newsrooms. Timed release in 2 hours. Evidence goes public whether we make it or not. He set up a dead man's switch. If they didn't check in every hour, the emails would send immediately. Smart. Ruthlessly, terrifyingly smart for a 9-year-old. Emmy sat up, still weak, but conscious. "We're going to save her, aren't we?" Melissa looked at her children. Jake, determined. Emmy, fragile, but resolute. They'd been through hell already. Asking them to walk into more danger felt like parental malpractice. But leaving Catherine to die felt like abandoning the only family Robert had left. Sometimes being a mother means teaching your children that some fights matter more than safety. "Yes, we're going to save her." The warehouse sat on the Deschutes River old timber storage facility with corrugated metal sides and broken windows. They approached at 1:30 in the morning, moving through shadows. 2 guards outside, smoking cigarettes. Miller's crew. Melissa told the kids to wait 200 yards back in the trees with the phone. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, run to Highway 20. Flag down police. Jake's response was immediate and expected. We're not leaving you. This is not negotiable. We'll count to 1,000. Then we're coming anyway. Melissa realized she'd lost control of this situation somewhere between the bunker and the river. Her children were no longer children who obeyed. They were survivors who made their own tactical decisions. Fine, 1,000. Then you run. Not rescue. Understood? Jake nodded. Emmy gripped his hand. Melissa circled the building. Loading dock door was ajar. She slipped inside among stacks of lumber and empty offices. Voices carried from the back, Miller and Sheriff Thomas arguing. Lewis said, "Keep her alive until we get the cloud password. She's been here 4 days. She's not talking. Lewis is flying out tonight. After that, she's a liability." Melissa followed the voices to a small office. Catherine Hill was tied to a chair, beaten, dehydrated, but alive. Her eyes were cop's eyes, assessing, calculating, waiting for opportunity. Melissa picked the lock with a paperclip. Jake had taught her the basics during their hours hiding in the truck stop bathroom. The mechanism clicked open. Catherine's head snapped toward the sound. Who? Melissa pressed a finger to her lips. Robert's granddaughter. I'm getting you out. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. He's dead, isn't he? Yes. And we're finishing what you started. She cut Catherine's restraints with a knife from the guard she'd knocked unconscious in the hallway. Catherine rubbed circulation back into her wrists. The master file. Under the floorboard where Robert proposed. In the bunker. It's video of Lewis ordering Patricia Morgan's execution. The car accident that wasn't. With that, FBI can prosecute for murder. We need to move. Now! Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple people. Too many to hide from. Then Jake and Emmy appeared in the doorway. They'd counted to 1,000. 16 minutes. Jake carried a metal pipe as weapon. Emmy stood behind him, small and terrified, but present. Melissa's anger and pride collided. I told you to wait. We're a team. Jake's voice allowed no argument. The loading bay doors crashed open. Miller's truck roared inside headlights, flooding the warehouse. Sheriff Thomas and 2 deputies followed. They were trapped, no exit visible. Melissa positioned herself between the men and Catherine, Jake, Emmy. Step away from her, Melissa. Miller's voice was tired. Like this was tedious business he wanted finished. Sheriff Thomas held his gun loosely, not quite pointing it. We just want the cloud password. Give it up. We let you go. Melissa held up Laura's phone, showing the sent confirmation emails. The evidence already went out. FBI has it. It's over. Thomas looked at the screen. Timestamp showed emails sent 18 minutes ago. She's telling the truth. The sheriff lowered his weapon. I'm done. I didn't sign up for murdering kids. Miller's rage erupted. You're my brother-in-law, and you just destroyed both our lives. I'm out. Thomas backed toward the door. Miller raised his gun and shot his own brother-in-law in the shoulder. Non-fatal, but deliberate. You don't walk away from family. Thomas collapsed, screaming, crawled outside. His radio crackled, calling for backup medical assistance, finally choosing survival over loyalty. Miller turned his weapon on Melissa and the kids. Cloud password. Now. Or I start with the youngest. He pointed the gun at Emmy. What Melissa learned in that moment was that there are things worse than dying, watching your children die, ranked somewhere near the top. But Emmy moved faster than Miller expected, bit his gun hand hard enough to draw blood. Miller howled, jerked back. Jake swung the metal pipe connected with Miller's knee. The joint bent wrong. Miller went down. Melissa didn't think. She grabbed the gun from Thomas's holster. He dropped it when shot and fired at Miller. The bullet hit his thigh. He collapsed screaming. The sound of helicopters descending. Multiple aircraft. FBI tactical response triggered by the cloud upload and Thomas's distress call. Agent Jennifer Williams led the team through the loading bay. Tactical gear, federal credentials, clean eyes, the kind of law enforcement that still believed in something beyond profit. Miller, Thomas, 2 deputies arrested on scene. Catherine taken to ambulance. Melissa's legs gave out. Adrenaline crash stealing the last of her strength. Agent Williams knelt beside her. You just brought down the largest smuggling operation in Pacific Northwest history. The words felt hollow. Melissa had just shot a man. Her children had witnessed it. Emmy had bitten someone. Jake had attacked an adult with a pipe. The victory tasted like ash, but Kenneth Lewis fled. The chase happened 12 hours later. Melissa had been treated at hospital IV antibiotics for the infection stitches for the wound observation for fever. Kids stayed with the victim services coordinator while Catherine recovered in a nearby room under federal protection. Agent Williams came to Melissa's hospital room with urgent news. Lewis tracked to Redmond Municipal Airport. Private plane. Engines running. They needed Melissa for witness identification. Melissa left the kids with Catherine, the two forming unexpected bond over shared love for Robert, and took the helicopter to the airstrip. Lewis stood on the Learjet stairs, briefcase in hand, expensive suit, high-powered attorney beside him, smug expression that said he'd already won. The FBI surrounded him, 12 agents, weapons drawn. Lewis descended the stairs with theatrical confidence. You have circumstantial evidence at best. Laura Clark acted alone. Rogue agent. Agent Williams stepped forward. We have Williams's files, bank records, witness testimony from 47 co-conspirators who've already flipped, all inadmissible. Fruit of the poisonous tree. My attorney will shred your case before it reaches trial. Melissa stepped forward from behind the FBI line. You miscalculated. Lewis's eyes found her. Calculated. Cold. How so, Alta? You thought killing Robert would bury the evidence, but he left Catherine the master file. Agent Williams gestured. Catherine was brought forward in wheelchair, still weak, but present, and wearing a wire. The LED blinked green active recording. Lewis's face drained of color. Catherine's voice was steady despite her injuries. Your attorney visited me in the hospital 3 hours ago, offered me $5 million to recant testimony and disappear. You said, and I quote, Patricia Morgan was a necessary elimination. Robert Williams was the same. You're next unless you cooperate. Lewis stared at the wire. That recording is inadmissible. I had no idea she was recording. Agent Williams smiled. Oregon is one-party consent state. She consented. The recording is legal. Lewis lunged at Catherine. Federal agents tackled him before he crossed 2 feet. He screamed into the tarmac. Robert Williams ruined everything. He should have stayed hidden. Melissa knelt so Lewis could see her face. He stayed hidden for 30 years, protecting me. You came for his family. Fatal mistake. The realization that drives people to fight isn't anger. It's understanding that some legacies are worth more than survival. They dragged Lewis to federal transport vehicle, still screaming, still blaming Robert, never understanding that he'd created his own destruction by threatening a grandmother Melissa had never met. Catherine revealed the master file's location to FBI. Concrete bunker, floorboard under Robert's workbench. The SD card was recovered within hours. Video quality was surprisingly good for something filmed in 2015. Lewis meeting with a man later identified as professional hitman, handing over $100,000 in cash. Audio was crystal clear. Make Patricia Morgan's car accident look natural. No witnesses. Understood. 3 days before Morgan died in a single car accident, that state police ruled driver error. The trials took 6 months. Melissa testified at 4 of them. The kids were spared testimony due to age, though Jake's disposable camera photos became evidence he'd documented the bunker, the files, everything with mechanical precision. Richard Miller, 25 years, federal prison for assault, human trafficking, attempted murder. Sheriff Donald Thomas pleaded guilty to corruption and accessory to murder. 12 years with possibility of parole. Laura Clark, 15 years for murder of Robert Williams, kidnapping, extortion. Former FBI status earned her harsher sentencing. Kenneth Lewis, life without parole. First-degree murder of Patricia Morgan and Robert Williams. Racketeering, drug trafficking. The jury deliberated 90 minutes. 47 additional arrests across Oregon, Washington, and California. Lumber mill workers, border officials, real estate agents, the entire network collapsed like house of cards once the foundation crumbled. National media descended. Single mother topples crime dynasty. Book offers, movie rights, interview requests that never stopped coming. Melissa refused everything. This isn't entertainment. Robert Williams died for justice, not profit. Emmy's drawings became children's book, simple illustrations showing grandfather who protected family from afar. Proceeds funded crime victim assistance programs. 50,000 downloads in the first month. The $80,000 from the bunker created legal complications. FBI traced the bills to 1998 bank robbery. Evidence that Robert had confiscated during some undocumented investigation. Melissa turned it over voluntarily. The reward for returning stolen property was $35,000. She split it 3 ways. $20,000 for kids' education fund, $10,000 down payment on small house near Catherine's witness protection location, $5,000 for ongoing therapy. All 3 of them needed it. Jake had nightmares about drowning. Emmy stopped drawing for 2 months. Melissa couldn't sleep without checking locks 3 times, clearing every room, maintaining sight lines to exits. The therapist explained that trauma doesn't end when the threat does. It lives in your body long after your mind understands you're safe. The county waived the $6,000 tax debt. Public goodwill gesture, good optics. Melissa accepted and decided to rebuild the cabin, not as museum to Robert's paranoia, as family home, place where children could learn that fear doesn't have to define you. Catherine helped design the renovations. She understood Robert's intentions better than anyone. He wanted it lived in, filled with children's laughter, not empty and cold. The rebuild took 8 months. Modern electricity and plumbing, insulation, structural reinforcements. But they kept the original bones. The pantry where they'd found the hidden door, the music box on the shelf, the memorial plaque outside Robert Williams, 1947 to 2024. The Silent Guardian. FBI files revealed Robert's full impact. 30 years of anonymous tips had prevented 9 murders, stopped 4 kidnappings. His evidence led to Canadian border security overhaul, saved countless lives by disrupting opioid pipeline. The local newspaper ran a feature, Oregon's Unknown Hero. The community erected a statue in Pine Ridge Town Square, Robert Williams standing with one hand extended as if helping someone up. Melissa brought Jake and Emmy to visit their mother's grave 6 months after Lewis's conviction. Time to explain things they were old enough to understand. Your grandmother loved Robert, but she was terrified. When her own mother died because of his investigation, she couldn't forgive him. Fear makes us push away the people trying to protect us. Jake processed this with his analytical mind. Like you were angry at Grandpa at first, before you understood. Exactly. Emmy traced her grandmother's name on the headstone. But we didn't push you away, Mommy. No, you made me braver than I knew I could be. Catherine became active presence in their lives, not grandmother by blood, but by choice. She taught them to fish, track wildlife, read topographical maps, skills Robert had taught her during their years investigating together. Emmy called her Grandma Kate within 3 months. Jake asked the question one evening while they were fishing. Did Grandpa really love you? Catherine's eyes went distant. More than anything. But he loved your mother more. Everything he did was for her, for all of you. She gave Melissa a sealed envelope 1 year after Robert's death. He wrote this the day before he died. Never got to send it. Melissa opened it alone on the cabin's porch. Robert's handwriting slightly shaky, but legible. Dear Melissa, by the time you read this, you'll know everything. I'm sorry I couldn't be the grandfather you deserved, but I hope I left you something more valuable than money. The truth and the tools to fight for it. Your mother was right to protect you from me. I brought death everywhere I went, but I was right to protect you from them. Sometimes love means staying away. Sometimes it means leaving a loaded gun. You'll know which choice to make when your time comes. I'm proud of you. I was always proud of you. Tell Jake he has my stubbornness. Tell Emmy she has my intuition. Live free, live loud, live without fear. Love Grandpa Robert. Melissa folded the letter carefully, tucked it in the music box next to Catherine's letters. Legacy wasn't what you inherited, it was what you chose to become. 1 year after Lewis's arrest, the cabin transformation was complete. Jake's room filled with the engineering books. Emmy's room converted to art studio overlooking the valley. Melissa's room had view of the mountains where she'd learned what she was capable of. Catherine's guest cottage sat 50 yards away, small and efficient. She visited weekly, stayed weekends, integrated into their lives like she'd always been there. Jake was 10 now, wanted to be FBI agent and engineer both, built security system for the cabin using motion sensors from hardware store, protective of his mother and sister in ways that would have seemed odd before their ordeal. Now it just seemed necessary. Emmy was 9. Her graphic novel series, The Grandpa Who Saved Us, had developed following online. Self-published. 70,000 downloads. Every dollar donated to foster care organizations because Emmy understood what it meant to have unstable home. She still had dreams, still claimed Robert visited her. Melissa no longer dismissed it. Some things couldn't be explained by logic. Melissa's new job was data security consultant. Remote work, $75,000 annually. Stable for first time in her life. The irony wasn't lost. She helped companies prevent corporate espionage using skills learned from Robert's files. The bunker remained beneath the cabin, but they'd converted it. Time capsule now, filled with family photos, kids' artwork, letters documenting what had happened. Jake's idea future generations should know what Grandpa did. Hidden entrance remained, but the kids knew where it was. No more secrets. Pine Ridge rebuilt its reputation after the corruption purge. New sheriff from Portland, vetted by FBI. Town council invited Melissa to meetings. The Thompson family was respected now, no longer feared. Gary Young stayed in touch, the truck driver who'd helped them, visited quarterly with gifts for the kids. Romantic tension existed between him and Melissa. Slow burn, testing waters. Emmy noticed first. Gary makes Mommy smile different. Jake's assessment was more pragmatic. He's okay for a truck driver. Melissa was taking it slow. Trust had been shattered and required time to rebuild. But Gary understood. He'd lost people too, knew that healing happened in its own time. Thanksgiving dinner at the cabin brought everyone together. Catherine, Gary, Agent Jennifer Williams, who'd become friend beyond professional relationship. Melissa, Jake, Emmy. They toasted with apple cider for the kids, wine for adults. Catherine raised her glass first, to Robert, who taught us that inheritance isn't money, it's mission. Jake added his toast, to Mom, who finished what Grandpa started. Emmy's contribution made everyone pause. And to family, the one we're born into and the one we choose. Melissa fought tears. To all of us, for surviving. The conversation turned lighter. Stories about Robert, Catherine filling in gaps, the time he'd accidentally set fire to the bunker testing radio equipment, the time he'd tracked Miller's lumber trucks for 3 days straight without sleep, and hallucinated federal agents in the trees. Emmy made her request when the laughter faded. Can we tell the story again? From the beginning. Which part? The part where you got the yellow paper and everything changed. That's a long story, baby. We have time. Catherine leaned forward. And I'll fill in the parts about your grandfather that your mom doesn't know. Melissa began the words coming easier now with distance. It started with an eviction notice on the worst possible day. The camera of memory pulled back. Warm cabin light against dark forest. Family around table, laughing. Robert's memorial plaque visible on the porch. Forest no longer threatening, just protective. What Jake and Emmy learned that year was that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to fight anyway, because some things matter more than safety. What Melissa learned was that inheritance can be burden or weapon, but it's always choice. Robert had left her both. She'd chosen weapon. What Catherine learned was that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into legacy carried forward by people brave enough to finish what others started. The final question arrived from Emmy as they cleaned dishes. Mommy, if you could go back and take Mr. Miller's money instead, would you? Melissa considered this. Honest answer? Required. Would you want me to? No. Because then Grandma Kate would be dead, and Mr. Lewis would still be hurting people. Emmy's 9-year-old wisdom cut straight to truth. Then, no, I wouldn't change anything, not even the scary parts, especially not the scary parts. They taught us who we are. The kids went to bed. Catherine retired to her cottage. Gary helped Melissa finish dishes, then headed to his truck for the long drive back. Before he left, he asked the question he'd been holding. You ever think about what's next after all this? What do you mean? You finished Robert's mission, got justice, rebuilt the cabin. What's your mission now? Melissa looked through the window at her sleeping children. Jake's security system blinking green, Emmy's artwork covering the walls, Catherine's cottage lights glowing warm. My mission is teaching them that justice matters, that family is worth fighting for, that inheritance isn't what you're given, it's what you become." Gary smiled. "That's a pretty good mission." He drove away. Melissa locked the doors, checked the windows, cleared the rooms, old habits that would probably never fade. She sat on the porch in darkness, looking at Robert's memorial plaque, thinking about the letter he'd written, the grandfather she'd never known who'd spent 30 years protecting her from shadows. If you inherited not money, but a dangerous truth, would you run and stay safe, or fight and risk everything? Melissa had made her choice. Her children had made theirs. Together, they'd proven that ordinary people could stand against corruption when the cost of silence became too high. The question wasn't whether they'd been brave. The question was whether their story would inspire others to recognize that sometimes the hardest inheritance is the one that asks you to become more than you thought possible. Have you ever discovered something about your family that completely changed how you saw your past? You're not alone. Share your story. Someone needs to hear it.